What if one of the world's oldest civilizations never truly disappeared? You were taught that civilizations rise, fall, and vanish, that when empires collapse, their people vanish too. The Mycenaeans, the legendary architects of early Greece, were said to have vanished around 1200 BC, swallowed by fire, famine, and myth. But what if that wasn't the end? What if they didn't vanish at all? For centuries, historians debated, who were the Greeks really? Were they descendants of ancient glory, or the children of conquerors and colonizers? Texts pointed in all directions: Ottoman invasions, Roman occupation, even Slavic migrations in the 6th and 7th centuries AD. Waves upon waves of outsiders, each said to dilute the bloodline, erase the past. But then, in 2017, something changed. A team led by Dr. Iosif Lazaridis at Harvard pulled DNA from 19 ancient skeletons: Mycenaeans, Minoans, Bronze Age farmers. Their team analysed over 1.2 million SNPs, markers across the genome that could trace thousands of years of ancestry. What they found was shocking. Modern Greeks, walking the streets of Athens, tending vineyards in Crete, praying in the shadows of ruined temples, carry 70 to 80% of the same DNA as those ancient Mycenaean skeletons. The bloodline never broke. No massive population replacement, no disappearance, no clean slate. In their bones lives a story no history book told you. The genetic fingerprint of early Neolithic farmers from Anatolia circa 7000 BC, the Caucasus, Iran-related admixture that arrived by 3000 BC, and yes, a whisper of the steppe nomads from around 2000 BC, carried on horsebacks, embedding a new language into old soil. It's all there, preserved in chromosomes, passed from warrior to farmer, from priest to child, the collapse of palaces, recorded, the birth of myths, encoded, the fires of Troy, buried in mitochondria. But if the genome remembers it all, why did we forget? If the bloodline never broke, why did the story of its survival go silent for over 3,000 years? They never shared a language, but their genomes were nearly twins. Two civilizations, divided by land, script, and myth. 1. The Minoans, who rose on Crete around 2600 BC, flourishing with sea trade, frescoes, and an undeciphered script. The other, the Mycenaeans, who emerged on the mainland by 1700 BC, writing the earliest known Greek in Linear B and eventually spreading across the Aegean like wildfire. History paints them as opposites. The Minoans were peaceful navigators, artists. Their palaces, like Knossos, were sprawling, open, and centered around rituals. The Mycenaeans, fortress builders, warriors. Their cities, like Mycenae and Pylos, were hardened and walled. But then, ancient DNA stepped in. In the landmark 2017 study led by Dr. Iosif Lazaridis, researchers sequenced genomes from both civilizations. The shock? Nearly identical DNA profiles. Both descended from Neolithic Anatolian farmers who migrated around 7000 BC, bringing agriculture and the base layer of Greek identity. Even more surprising, both shared a secondary ancestry from populations related to the Caucasus and Iran, likely arriving by 3000 BC. Not raiders, but settlers. A quiet gene flow from the east, long before the famous Indo-European invasions. So much blood in common, yet so many cultural contrasts. The Minoans wrote in symbols no one's ever translated. The Mycenaeans? Their tablets preserved inventory, worship rituals, order and power in written Greek. Art, architecture, even religion, they diverged. But under the skin, they were kin. Still, not entirely the same. because while both carried the Caucasus signal, only the Mycenaeans had something extra. A genetic guest from far beyond the Aegean. A sliver of ancestry the Minoans never touched. A whisper from the windswept plains of Eastern Europe. Yet in this shared bloodline, one crucial genetic difference would decide the fate of an entire civilization. Minoans missed it, the Mycenaeans embraced it, and it changed everything. It slipped in quietly, a spectral thread, thin, foreign and unstoppable. This wasn't just another layer of ancestry, it was a turning point, and only one of these two civilizations received it. It didn't come from Anatolia, not from the Levant. This was from far beyond the mountains, past the Black Sea, beyond the rivers of myth, the Eastern European steppe. The Mycenaeans, by the late 2nd millennium BC, began showing signs of steppe ancestry, ranging between 4 and 16%. A whisper in their blood, faint but unmistakable. The Minoans had none. That difference wasn't random, it had a name, the Yamnaya. Around 3000 to 2500 BC, these nomadic herders thundered westward with horses, chariots, and something even more powerful, language. Most of Europe, including Greece, would never be the same. And it wasn't a full invasion. That's the twist. It wasn't masses of people flooding into Greece. It was a few men, powerful, mobile, carrying genes on horseback. Geneticists call it elite dominance. A small ruling class arrives, mates locally, spreads a new language, a new social order, without wiping out the people. This wasn't genocide, it was a genetic coup. And we know it happened, because we found the body. The Griffin warrior, unearthed in 2015 near Pylos, buried around 1450 BC. A man of immense wealth, his grave packed with gold rings, ivory combs, and a Minoan-style sealstone so detailed it stunned archaeologists. But his DNA, a mix of Aegean farmer ancestry and a trace of steep lineage. The grave goods said Minoan. The genes whispered Mycenaean. The mix wasn't cultural, it was biological, and that, right there, is the origin of Proto-Greek, a new language carried not by a people, but by a lineage. But the DNA of one burial didn't just whisper about war, it screamed of collapse. They built Europe's first palaces and married their cousins to keep them. Behind the beauty of Crete, behind the painted bulls and open-air sanctuaries, there was something else, a quiet code, hidden deep inside family bones. In 2023, a groundbreaking nature study examined 102 ancient genomes from Crete and the surrounding Aegean. For the first time, scientists were able to reconstruct entire family trees from 3,600-year-old infant burials, some barely a few months old. And what they found was staggering. Almost 1/3 of these children were born from first or second cousin unions. That's not incidental. That's systematic. A level of endogamy, marrying within bloodlines, rare even in ancient royalty. It shocked geneticists. This wasn't Egypt. It wasn't Mesopotamia. No written records ever hinted that Bronze Age Crete, the seat of Europe's first advanced civilization, practiced such close kin unions. But the DNA was unflinching. Why? The answer lies in land and legacy. Minoan society was built on control of the most precious resource in the Mediterranean world, agriculture, olive oil, wine, grain, and land meant power. Power meant inheritance. And inheritance required purity, trust, bloodline loyalty. So families kept their land by marrying their own. Across hills and coastlines, tomb after tomb whispered the same thing, cousin to cousin, kin to kin, generation after generation, not by chance, by design. And this wasn't just aristocracy. Even among village elites, the same patterns held. The structures were tribal, ancient but perfectly ordered. Through DNA sequencing and radiocarbon dating, scientists could trace the lineage of a single family for centuries. Entire bloodlines buried together, generation by generation, like chapters of a book written in bone. But in preserving power, something was lost: freedom, love, genetic diversity. The price of empire, paid not in war, but in weddings. And yet, even beneath the calculated structure of these palaces lay something older, something untouched by inheritance. A presence deeper than gold, deeper than blood. But inside these tombs, something even older than the palaces was waiting to be uncovered. Long before Homer, the Greek genome was ploughing soil. Before the Mycenaean kings carved citadels into mountaintops, before the Minoans raised palaces with painted walls and sacred bulls, before scripts, before warriors, before gods, there were farmers, and not just any farmers, the first ones to ever step foot on Greek soil. Around 7000 BC, people from Neolithic Anatolia crossed the Aegean, bringing with them something Greece had never seen: wheat, barley, domesticated animals, pottery, permanence. And they didn't just bring food, they brought their DNA. In those early settlers, geneticists found mtDNA haplogroups, H, J, T and Y DNA markers, G2A and J2- lineages that still live on in modern Greeks today. These weren't mythic warriors or foreign invaders. They were quiet builders, parents, survivors. Their footprints are scattered across Thessaly, Crete, Peloponnese, in the form of mud brick houses, grain pits, and burial chambers tucked beneath their own homes. Their teeth still hold residues of ancient diets. Their bones, mapped by isotope analysis, tell of lives rooted to the same soil for generations. The story isn't glamorous, but it is the foundation. These farmers didn't just plant crops, they planted identity. They set in motion a genetic legacy that endured collapses, conquests, and catastrophe. And while later poets would sing of spear-wielding heroes, the real blood of Greece, its unbroken core, was formed under sunlight, beside olive trees, amid herds and harvests. This is the earliest confirmed layer of Greek DNA. And it never left. From Harvard's paleogenomic labs to Crete's Neolithic dig sites, every test confirms the same thing. Greek history doesn't start with war, it starts with wheat. But these early settlers weren't alone in the Aegean for long, because as they built homes and families, other bloodlines were already watching the horizon. But even as these farmers sowed fields, other bloodlines were already moving toward Greece. Historians said the Dorians stormed in. DNA says no one came. For over a century it was taught like gospel, that around 1200 BC everything changed. Palaces crumbled, cities were abandoned, writing disappeared. And the cause? Historians gave it a name: the Dorian invasion. A sudden flood of northern tribes, wiping out the Mycenaean elite, replacing their language and starting anew. A cultural reboot, a clean slate. That's what the textbook said. But DNA doesn't lie. When ancient genomes were pulled from late Bronze Age and early Iron Age skeletons across mainland Greece and Crete, something strange happened. There was no genetic rupture, no evidence of mass replacement. The people before the collapse were still the people after. Same mitochondrial haplogroups, same paternal lines. The genetic thread remained continuous, and it wasn't just in the blood. Pottery styles evolved, but didn't vanish. Burial practices, though simplified, showed continuity. Most revealing of all, the Linear B script, once thought lost in the collapse, turned out to be a direct predecessor to ancient Greek. In 1952, a British architect named Michael Ventris cracked the code. Linear B wasn't foreign, it wasn't erased, it was Greek, early, raw, but unmistakably Greek. So if the Dorians didn't erase the Mycenaeans, who did? Science may have part of the answer. In 2020, researchers discovered traces of Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the plague, in ancient teeth found in Crete and surrounding regions, dated to just before the collapse. Combined with signs of drought, trade breakdown, and internal revolt, the picture began to shift. This wasn't invasion, it was unraveling, not a single sword, but 1,000 silent threads pulling apart at once. The world blamed outsiders. But DNA says the disaster came from within. Still, something's missing. A collapse of that scale leaves echoes, and one artifact, buried in silence, might hold the answer. If no new people came, then who destroyed Mycenaean civilization? We thought we knew who the Greeks were, who counted as one of them. Blood, ancestry, homeland. That's what built nations. That's what made identity, right? Until we found the bones. Greek soldiers, buried in Sicily, but their DNA traced to the Caucasus. In 480 BC, on the coast of northern Sicily, the city of Himera faced annihilation. Carthaginian forces stormed its gates. A desperate call went out to mainland Greece. Reinforcements came, hoplites, swordsmen, archers. They fought, they died, and were buried where they fell, in mass graves. For centuries their remains were silent, but recently DNA testing on these warrior skeletons, across dozens of tombs, opened a door no historian expected. The locals, the civilians, genetically Aegean, roots from Thessaly, the Peloponnese, the islands, but the soldiers? Their DNA told a different story. Some traced back to the Caucasus, others to the Pontic steppe. A few even carried northern European ancestry, not Greek, not even Balkan. These weren't Athenian sons or Spartan elites. They were foreign-born mercenaries recruited into Greek armies, fighting under Greek banners. Their weapons matched Greek styles. Their graves were marked Greek. Their last breath was for a Greek city. But their blood wasn't. This wasn't an accident. It was structured. A military identity, not an ethnic one. Hellas wasn't defined by DNA. It was built by allegiance. They weren't seen as outsiders on the battlefield. They were comrades, brothers in arms. So the question shifts, radically. If the classical Greek army didn't require Greek blood, if blood didn't define Greek identity, then what did? Maybe it was language, or belief, or something even deeper, a feeling of home. But for one civilization, identity became a mask, a beautiful one, painted, misunderstood, and nearly erased. They wore exotic robes and built Egyptian-style frescoes, but they weren't African. For over a century, theories floated like ghosts that the Minoans of Crete, builders of Europe's first palaces, were Egyptian immigrants, or Phoenician traders, or even a lost African colony. And at first glance, the myth made sense. Their art shimmered with Egyptian influence, saffron yellows, papyrus blues, profiled figures dressed in flowing robes. Their goddess statues, open palms, wide eyes, serpents in hand. To European scholars in the 19th century, this didn't feel Greek. It felt foreign. They weren't just interpreting the past, they were projecting. But DNA shattered the illusion. A 2013 mitochondrial study, later expanded in the 2017 Lazaridis research, confirmed the truth. Minoan genomes carry no significant African or Levantine maternal ancestry. None. Instead, their roots run deep into the Aegean Neolithic lineages, a direct thread from the first European farmers, arriving as early as 7000 BC. These weren't visitors from the Nile Delta. They were indigenous, born of the soil, stone and salt of the Greek islands. The confusion was never in the DNA. It was in the eyes of those interpreting it. Romanticism needed the Minoans to be exotic, mystical, foreign. But the science speaks louder now. They were not from Egypt. They were not outsiders. They were Europe's oldest civilization, and they built wonders before even the first Greek word was written, and yet their cities fell, their language vanished, their temples crumbled, the bloodlines remained, but the voice of the Minoans disappeared. But if they weren't outsiders, why did they vanish so completely? Maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they were never gone, just hidden beneath centuries of names, flags and broken empires. From Romans to Slavs to Ottomans, Greek DNA still echoes Homer. You'd think Greece, with its history of conquest, Rome, Byzantium, Slavic migrations, Ottoman rule, would have seen its DNA overwritten, lost, drowned in waves of invasion. But that's not what the genes say. A 2017 genetic study led by Iosif Lazaridis revealed a staggering truth. Modern Greeks share 70 to 80% of their DNA with Bronze Age Mycenaeans. That's not folklore. That's biological continuity across 3,500 years. Even during the Slavic expansions of the 6th to 7th centuries AD, which historians once thought diluted Greek ancestry, modern haplogroup analysis tells a different story. The Y DNA markers, most common in Slavic populations like R1A, exist in Greece, yes, but in low concentrations. Meanwhile, ancient Aegean lineages like J2, E1b1b, and G2a still dominate the Greek mainland, the islands and Crete. What changed wasn't blood. It was customs, words, clothes, laws, religions, but not identity. Through it all, Greek culture endured, not because it stayed untouched, but because it absorbed and transformed. It danced with what came, without being consumed by it. In this way, the Greek genome isn't a shattered statue, it's a mosaic. Pieces from different centuries, colours from different empires, but still forming the same face. The face Homer might have known, the voice that whispered through Linear B. The bones have been buried beneath olive trees since Neolithic times. And yet beneath that mosaic, one question remains unanswered. Because beneath all the haplogroups, empires and buried cities, one truth keeps rising like dust through time. Who decides who belongs? If blood isn't the answer, what defines a people? The DNA says there's continuity. The archaeology shows it too. But culture, identity, that's messier. That's human. That the ancient Greeks themselves didn't agree. A man from Thebes might not see a Cretan as his equal. A Spartan could share genes with an Ionian and still call him a barbarian. In classical Athens, you could fight for the city, die for it, and still be denied citizenship if your mother wasn't from the right bloodline. And yet, we found mercenaries from the Caucasus buried with full Greek honours in Himera. We traced elite Mycenaeans who carried steppe ancestry, while the locals did not. We mapped infant burials in Knossos, revealing cousin marriages that protected land, but not always love. Today this argument isn't over, it's just changed forms. In Greece, North Macedonia, even the diaspora, politics now uses the past like a weapon. DNA tests are waved like scrolls of truth. I am more Greek than you. This proves who I really am. But science warns us. Ancestry is not race, and culture is not written in the genome. Iosif Lazaridis, the lead author of the 2017 study, put it best. Genetic continuity does not equal cultural continuity. Identity is shaped by much more. So what defines Greekness? Is it the language of Homer? The ruins of Delphi? The sound of bouzouki echoing through a summer night? Or is it something deeper? Something not written in books or genes? Because the final answer may not lie in our blood, but in our bones. But bones still whisper, and the earth, it never forgets. One more skeleton, one more surprise, one more story to rewrite everything. In labs from Boston to Berlin, from Athens to Ankara, fragments of the Greek past are arriving, quietly, on sterile trays, teeth, femurs, burial dust. Every sample holds secrets. And there are tens of thousands more on the way. The next Lazaridis study might already be in motion. New techniques, AI-powered genome prediction, proteomic mapping, strontium isotope tracing, are redefining what bones can say. We used to guess at the past through pottery. Now we extract the migration patterns of single families, who married whom, who moved when, who crossed a sea in the Bronze Age moonlight. But with this new power comes new questions. In Greece and beyond, ethical debates ignite. Should foreign researchers sample sacred remains? Should nations control their ancestral data? Is science unlocking history, or rewriting it without permission? Because this isn't just a Greek story, it's happening in Mexico, where indigenous tribes fight for DNA sovereignty. In India, where ancient genomes challenge caste origin myths. In the UK, where the Cheddar Man's face forced a country to rethink its roots. Greece, once again, is not alone, but it is central. Because the genome of a single islander from 7000 BC, buried with nothing but a stone pendant, might hold the key to the entire European puzzle. It's not over. It's barely begun. The soil of Crete, Thessaly, the Peloponnese, it still holds sentences we haven't read. And somewhere beneath the soil of Greece, the next sentence in history is waiting to be sequenced. If you're fascinated by lost histories and ancient DNA mysteries, subscribe for more untold stories.